Hi everybody, and welcome to the next installment of the Project Success Cooking Certificate Cooking Show. My name is James. If we've never met before, hi. If we have met before, now you've been reminded of my name. I usually teach the Cooking Certificate program on Wednesday nights here at the Project Success Institute. But of course, because we're all staying in right now, that's not possible. So this week and last week, I've been leading a cooking class here on Instagram Live, particularly for the students who've been part of our program. But if you happen to be watching and you've never been part of our program, that's totally fine. Hopefully you enjoy it anyway. Next week, because we're all going to be staying home most of the time, I anticipate that we're going to be doing this class from my apartment and my tiny kitchen. So maybe we'll focus on things that you can make in your tiny kitchen. Today, though, we're going to be focusing on something similar to what we did last week. So as you can see up here, the first image that I have, I don't know if you can tell what it is somebody washing their hands. It's something I've already done. But if you're planning on cooking along with us today, make sure you've already done that. Okay, let's move on to what we're focusing on. We are focusing on these. Once again, if you can't see, what we have here is some gray office supplies and the inside of somebody's pantry. Both are staples. We are not going to be working with the office supplies today. They are not very delicious and they'll cut up your tongue. We're focusing more on the pantry supplies that people just happen to keep around. Right about now, maybe you and your family have stocked up on some things that you know are going to last a little while. If so, you have staples. Staples is the word that we use to describe pantry supplies that keep for a while. So, like last week when we focused on rice, we're going to be looking at things that you may just have around. Now, some of these things may be things that you have in your pantry, but maybe your family keeps a very different set of things around. It depends upon who your family is and what part of the world you come from. So perhaps if you have a staples recipe or a pantry recipe that you know you and your family like to cook, you can share that with us. You can, of course, do that through Instagram. You can share things with us through our program's email at Project Success, which you can find through our website, www.projectsuccess.org. And then we can share it with the world. Today, we're going to be focusing on these two dishes, both of them pasta dishes. So the top one here is a fancy adult macaroni and cheese, and the bottom one is an Italian dish that focuses on the use of chickpeas and pasta. So that top one, the adult mac and cheese, I actually don't like the name of that. That's the name that a website called Bon Appetit gave to it, because I think it's super judgy. I mean, if you like your Kraft mac and cheese and you are an adult, then do you. However, if you'd like to try something a little bit different from that, we're going to be doing that today. I have a bit of a challenge. I have my work cut out for me because I'm going to be trying to prepare both of these at the same time. Pasta takes a little while to cook, and so I want to see if I can be cooking these two things at the same time instead of having to just fill like 10 or 15 minutes with chatter while we have some macaroni cooking or whatever. So we're going to start today with both pastas. So we've got our small shells here. So this is the first sort of fancy thing about this mac and cheese recipe is we're not using macaroni. We're using small shells. That's what they're actually called, just small shells. They're not like seashells from by the seashore, but they kind of look like that. They're really little. I'm using a whole pound of these. And we're also going to use some super fancy pasta. This is for that bottom dish. This is called, I shouldn't say it's fancy. Maybe it's not fancy to you. Conchiglie. I've never cooked with conchiglie before. The recipe calls for a different kind of pasta. Orecchi, I can't remember the name of it now. But it's another short pasta like this. In other words, it's not fettuccine, it's not linguine, it's not spaghetti. It's something short. So you can use penne if you want to. You can use, you could even use macaroni if you want. But I think that what they're going for is something that can sort of, has like a, like a hole in it or like a little cup in it that can hold a chickpea if a chickpea happens to fall in there. I don't know, sort of like an oyster and a pearl. Anyway, I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to put them into some boiling water that I have already got going. However, before I do that, I wanted to wait to do that because I wanted to show you what I'm doing first. I'm taking some salt here. Excuse me. I got emotional because I love salt so much. I'm going to take some salt here. I'm using kosher salt. You can use whatever you want. And I'm taking a big old handful of that and I'm putting it into my pasta water. One of the things that you'll know if you've come to my cooking class or if you have watched any cooking shows at all is that the key to well-seasoned pasta is salting your pasta water. If you don't do that, your pasta will come out bland. If you do that, your pasta is not going to come out salty. You're just going to taste everything else better. So I'm going to take my salt and dump it in here. And then I'm going to take my packages of pasta and I'm going to empty them in. So I'm going to disappear possibly for a moment while I do this, but I promise I'll be back. I'm not leaving you. Why would I do that? We've just gotten started. Now both of these pastas need to be cooked for around 12 minutes. Some people are real picky with their pasta. Sometimes people like it al dente, which means like partially cooked, partially uncooked, because they like the almost crunch of it. I'm not picky like that, and plus, because we're going to be doing both of these at the same time, there's a really strong chance that we're going to end up overcooking this pasta. I don't care about that. If you do, you can set a timer for exactly the way you want it. Here we go. Okay, I got both pastas going. Get rid of those in the recycling bin. Well, it's actually just one bin that everything is going to go in, and I'll separate it later. All right, so I'm going to set a timer here for 12 minutes. That'll go off when our pasta is done. I'm going to lower the heat just a little bit so it doesn't boil over. If you want to, you could share with me your favorite pasta in the comments. I can't promise I'll see it while I'm cooking because y'all are too far away from me. I can't see, I can't reach. However, I will look later on, and if I agree, then I'll let you know somehow. All right, so next, okay, right, we're going to work on that bottom one, so the pasta with chickpeas first. So let's go to our next slide here. We got to start out with an onion. We're going to use the whole thing. I'm using a yellow onion. You can use a white onion. I even made this with a red onion last week because it's what I happen to have around because all the grocery stores were cleaned out from onions, or at least the grocery stores that I went to. Red onion tasted great. There was really no problem with that at all. If you prefer a particular kind of onion, of course, go for it. Be your own guest. So what I'm doing here is I cut the onion in half, and now I'm peeling off the top layer. Some folks don't peel the top layer all the way off. They sort of hold it like a ponytail on the end here, so it's easier for them to hold. But I've never really done that. I'm not going to start tonight. It'd be a weird time to start a new habit while I'm being watched as I cook. So now that I've got my onion cut in half, I'm going to dice this the way that we've talked about in our certificate program. I'm going to, first of all, make sure I'm using the claw technique, so I'm avoiding cutting my fingertips. I'm folding them in so that way it's my knuckle that's guiding the blade and not my fingertips. And I am going to score the onion, not like score in a basketball game or in a soccer game, none of which are being played at the moment. I am going to cut it so it's almost like a fan, like that. And then I rotate it, and I go again. This time I'm going to drag the knife. Some people like to cut horizontally as well. That's not something I ever do. I just don't really need my onions that small. This is just fine for me. I don't like to waste any onion if I can help it, so I'm going to take this little piece here that's left over, and I'm going to cut that up too. I really like onion. I want as much of it in there as I can possibly get. Okay, there we go. That's half of my onion. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other half. Onion was always one of my favorite words to say when I was taking French in high school. L'oignon. L'oignon. And then, if you've ever seen the movie Amélie, there's like entire scenes built around a guy saying the word l'oignon. L'oignon. Okay, so I've just about got this peeled. It's a little green on the outside. That's a question of taste as well. Some people really don't like that. I am one of those people. I don't want that. To me, it's almost bitter. I don't want the bitter part of the onion in there. There we go. If all of this chatter is just too much for you, I have a couple of recommendations for you. If you go on YouTube, you'll find a number of channels that are devoted to people cooking with zero instructions. So you will hear only the sound of them chopping things and blending things and sauteing things. and it is surprisingly relaxing. One of them is called Silently Cooking, and then if you just search for that, you'll see a few other channels as well. I think Peaceful Cooking is another one, where it's, again, just people cooking in silence. So nobody filling space with words like I'm doing. I would maybe do a little bit more of that right now, but I'm aware that it might be difficult for you to see everything that I'm doing. Okay, I got my onions chopped. I'm going to push them to one side. And it's time for the garlic. We're going to use 3 cloves of garlic here. Let's see. I like the look of these 3. So, if you've ever cooked with me, or if you were maybe watching last week, I think maybe we cooked with some garlic last week, you know that chopping garlic is one of my favorite things to do, because you get to use the flat part of your blade to smash it down. So I'm going to cut off both ends of the clove of garlic, and then I'm going to take the flat of my blade, press it on top, and hit it like that, smashing the garlic. At that point, it's easy to peel off the skin of the garlic. Some people peel the garlic first. It's completely up to you. Now, the recipe doesn't call for a minced garlic. It calls for a sliced one, but that's a matter of taste as well. I like garlic to be more of a flavor than a texture, so I'm going to be mincing mine, but you can slice yours if you like. If you like, you can vote in the comments about whether you are a garlic mincer or a garlic slicer. I know that these are it's like the Capulets and the Montagues. It's two groups of cooks who are constantly at each other's throats. You can let us know which camp you fall into. I think that they probably make you choose your high-end culinary school based upon that. It's very important to know. All right, so now I'm going to mince these. I'm going to make sure I'm folding my fingertips in as best as I can. And then once I've got sort of a pile of garlic pieces, I'm going to go over them again using a different knife technique, which we've talked about a lot at the Institute, which is I'm going to place the tip of the knife down, and then I make almost like a V with my other hand, placing it on top of the blade. This way my fingertips are well out of the blade, and it doesn't take so long. It's kind of just sawing it up and down until it's the size that I want it. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So next, it's time for us to heat up one of these 2 pots. I'm going to use this one here. I'm going to place it on a medium heat. You can't see that from where you are. And then once I've got it at medium heat, I'm going to add, it says 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm just going to eyeball that. I'm not going to take out a measuring spoon and figure out how much that is. I've cooked with olive oil enough that I have a sense of how much that is. But if you are feeling like, I don't know, I don't want to put too much oil in there, you can certainly measure it out. And now, I'm pretty sure we're going to start to cook our onions and our garlic. But I'm noticing over here that my pasta water is bubbling up a lot. I don't want that bubbling water to seep through the lid and make a mess on the stove, so I'm going to turn down the heat just a little. We have about 4 minutes and 42 seconds left for that pasta, but my prediction is we're probably going to keep it cooking for longer than that. Okay, yep, let's cook the onions and the garlic. One of the things I like about this kind of chopping board is that once you're finished chopping with it, you can just take the things you were chopping and make a little funnel almost. Now this is one of those recipes where we're not starting with the garlic in at the same time as the onions. We're going to cook the onions for a little while until they're transparent, and then we're going to add the garlic after that. The reason why we do this is because garlic is, well, especially when you've got it minced like I do, it's smaller and it cooks much faster. I don't want to burn my garlic. I just want it, I want it to add flavor and I want it to add aroma to it. So if I burn it, I lose some of the things that I like about it. So I'm going to wait on that. Sometimes people add garlic to various different recipes at the same time as they're adding other, what they call aromatics. For example, if we were making a bolognese sauce, a lot of times people will add little tiny pieces of celery and carrots at the same time as they add their garlic. In our case, we might be adding some red pepper flakes at the same time as we add the garlic. And you typically just add that stuff all at once, and then you cook it quickly until you start to smell it. And when you do, it's time to add the next thing. So I always try to remember and frequently forget that I should have the next ingredients ready to go when I add the aromatics, because otherwise I end up overcooking them. Okay, now while that's going, I'm going to start in on some of the prep for the macaroni and cheese. So this starts with taking a stick of butter, and I'm going to peel off the wrapping of this butter here. This is just chilled, which means that I took it out of the refrigerator, I don't know, about an hour ago or something like that. I don't keep butter in the refrigerator as much as a lot of people that I know do, because there are things in the butter that keep it from spoiling, and I tend to use it before it would spoil anyway. I'm a big butter fan. I'm cutting this into 8 pieces, but I forgot to start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, perfect. 7, 8. And I can see that my onions are starting to cook here. Not quite transparent, but we're getting there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold actually on that piece. No, why don't we do it? All right, I'm going to turn the heat on the other stove. Nearly lost it there. There we go. That's way more of a flame than I want. That's more like it. So I've got it on like a medium low there. And I'm going to add my first piece of butter. At the same time as I do that, I'm going to take some ground pepper, and I'm going to add kind of a lot of it. Kind of a lot. What is that? 3 tablespoons, probably. Macaroni and cheese is one of those dishes that, if you're not careful, in my opinion, can be really bland and flavorless. So the black pepper helps with that. And while that melts, I'm going to add my garlic in with my onions. I'm going to get that moving around. And you can see the next thing up here that they're asking for is rosemary, and they're also asking for red pepper flakes. If you've ever cooked with me before, you know that I like things pretty spicy. I would say add red pepper flakes to taste. My taste is a lot. But one thing I don't want to do is to completely overwhelm the other flavors that are going to be in this dish, one of which is rosemary, which is one of my favorite flavors. Now, in the original recipe here, what they recommend doing is taking a sprig of rosemary. So that's almost like if it were to come directly off a bush or a tree, and then you were to toss it in there and then fish it out later on, just so that the flavor is added. In our case, I don't have a sprig of rosemary around, but I do have these dried rosemary leaves. I'm going to add some of those. Some people don't like these because you'll be eating something and then it's almost like you've got a pine needle in your teeth. And if you don't like that, then don't use dried rosemary leaves. Or you can cut them up really, really small. I can't be bothered. I don't mind having a little bit of a leaf in my teeth every now and then, so I'm going to add these in just like this. That looks good to me. I probably added about a tablespoon there. I'm going to mix these together, like I said. What you want is to be able to start to smell that stuff. And for once, I actually did prepare the next thing. And the next thing in this case are our chickpeas and our tomatoes. So here's a can of chickpeas. What I love about chickpeas is that they are cheap and they keep forever. So, and unlike a lot of other beans that are dried, they don't take that long to cook. So I'm going to add my entire can. And they want us to add a cup of the whole peeled tomatoes. So these are not the kind that you get that say diced. These are still all in one piece, and they've been peeled. This is the kind we always had when I was a kid. Spaghetti was one of the things we made the most often. And I didn't know that you could buy pre-made sauce until I was like in college or something, because this is what we always did. It wasn't fancy by any means, but we used the whole peeled tomatoes to make our own sauce. So I love these. And because I love them, I'm not going to measure out a cup. I'm going to add the whole thing. You can measure out a cup if you like. Your mileage may vary. Then once you've got the tomatoes in there, you're going to take whatever you're using to stir with. I'm using sort of like a wooden spatula here. And you can mash the tomatoes. Some people use a potato masher for that. You're welcome to do that if you like. It's kind of fun to do. However, I would recommend if you use a potato masher to mash your tomatoes, put on an apron, because sometimes the juices from the tomatoes will just splash up and go wherever. All right, I'm going to mix this all together. I heard a little while ago that our pasta timer went off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the heat on our pasta. Now, this dish that I'm making with the chickpeas, technically, is a dish where you don't have to pre-cook the pasta at all. You can make the whole thing in one pot. So once you have everything that we just added up to a boil, you can add the pasta in, cover it for 12 minutes, and the whole thing is more or less done. I'm not doing that today because of what I mentioned before with the timing issues, but you certainly can. I'm going to turn up the heat on this because I do want to get almost a rolling boil here. That's when all the flavors start to mix. And then I'll bring it down to a simmer where I'll keep it for a good long time, because you really can't cook a pasta sauce for too long. The longer you cook it, the more the flavors get in there. I'm not going to taste that just yet. But one thing I'm realizing that we did miss is my favorite friend, salt. There we go. Okay, I'm going to leave that be for a little while. Meanwhile, our butter here has melted. I had it on a medium-low, so it hasn't yet browned, but it's about to. So what we're going to do, check out this recipe. I love this. So on the Bon Appetit website, they have just a beautiful demonstration of this recipe. Not only do they show you everything that you're going to need, they also have these little GIFs that demonstrate what each step looks like. So this one here is showing you how you would cook the pasta. For some reason, it's loading a little bit slowly right now, but that's fine. We don't need the whole GIF. But if you go to their website, you can certainly check that out for yourself. Okay, so now what we're going to add to our melted butter is 1 cup of milk. They say whole milk, but they were out of whole milk at the store because Minnesota knows what's good, which is whole milk. If you prefer skim milk, it's your prerogative. You're wrong, but it's your prerogative. I'm going to take a cup of this. Oh boy, here we go. Now, ordinarily we'd use something that you would measure liquid with rather than a cup measure like this, but this will work just fine. I'm going to pour the whole thing in there. I'm going to get this out of the way. Grab my spatula. This is smelling really good. I imagine you can smell it at home too. Okay, so now that I've got my butter, my pepper, and my milk all in the same pan, I'm going to add another chunk of butter. And I'm going to keep on adding chunks of butter, melting them one at a time. In order to do that, I'm going to turn up my heat just a little. A lot of people like to bake their macaroni and cheese. That's certainly something that you can do once we're finished with the stages we're working on right now. Although it's not really a part of this particular recipe. Okay, so this is now exactly where I want it. So this is my chickpeas. They're starting to they're not at a rolling boil yet, they're just simmering. So now that we've got them simmering, let's see what's next in that recipe. Oh my gosh, jumping back and forth. I feel like it's Thanksgiving or something. Yep, it's time for the pasta. So now what we're going to do, let me just take a quick look and see if our butter is melted over here yet. No, not yet. So I'm going to take my shells, and I'm going to step off screen just for a moment because I'm going to be using a colander to drain my pasta. I'm going to save the pasta water, though, because we're going to be using it later on. So here we go. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is the fancy pasta that I'm draining now. Here we go. Oh, wow. This pasta is super cool looking. All right, I'm going to drip a little bit, but I want you all to be able to see that. Check out this pasta. Can you? It's very... I dropped some on the floor. I'll clean it up later. Okay, so there we go. I've got my pasta cooked. I'm going to add this now to my chickpeas. I'm going to mix that all together. I'm going to add some more butter to my macaroni and cheese sauce that's happening over here. Oh, that looks fantastic. I'm going to bring the heat down on the chickpeas. We don't need to really cook it that much anymore. The whole thing is more or less done. That's great. That's a lot of pasta in there. I'm glad I added that entire can of tomatoes. Now I'm going to taste that in a moment to make sure it's going the way that I want it to. In the meantime, now that that's more or less done, I'm going to chop up some parsley here, which we're going to use with the chickpeas. You chop up parsley in the same way that you chop up cilantro, which is something that we did last week. So we are going to hold the parsley by the stems, and then you drag the blade down, which separates the leaves from the stems. And once you have about as much as you feel like you want, that's good for me. I'll use this later. Then you can decide what you want to do with these leaves and stems. You can either chop them really, really small, or you can use the whole leaf. It depends upon the texture that you like. I'm not the hugest parsley fan in the world, so I'm going to chop it up pretty small. So I'm going to make a pile of parsley just like this. And I'm going to mince it in the same way as I did the garlic. So I've got the tip of the knife blade down, and I'm rocking it over and over, cutting it smaller each time. This is a great knife. IKEA makes the finest steel, everybody. The finest Swedish knife. I have to assume it's the knife used by the Swedish chef, whose cooking outfit is a lot more authentic than mine. I'm going to add some more butter to our macaroni and cheese. I think I'm going to go ahead and add 2. It's melting at a pretty good clip. Okay, I'm going to take my parsley and I'm going to drop it in there. A lot of times people use parsley as a garnish. In this particular dish, you add it before you're done. And then the next thing that it's asking for is Parmesan cheese. So how much do you want to add? How much do you like Parmesan cheese? I like it a fair amount. So I'm going to add a fair amount of cheese. When I say a fair amount, I probably added about, I would say 1/4 to 1/2 cup. And I mix that in. Parmesan cheese is one of those cheeses that does not melt right away. But I can tell that our dish is actually pretty hot because it is melting. Oh my gosh, that looks so good. Oh, I'm excited about that. I'm going to turn off the heat on this now because I feel like we are almost at the finish line for that dish. Let me add some more butter over here. I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of it. And as that melts, I'm going to taste this dish and see if it's the way that I want it. Oh, that is great. That's really nice, and it's one of the few times when I really do like parsley in something too. Because in this case, what the parsley and the tomato combine to do is they add a little bit of acid to the dish, which balances the palate. So if we didn't have tomatoes, and if we didn't have parsley, it would just be chickpeas and pasta and a few other things, onions and stuff like that, which are all kind of bland. And if you don't add any acid to them, then you don't taste what's good even about those things. I would say that's even salted enough so I can taste everything that's in there. I'm not even going to add more pepper to it. I really like that flavor. So let me check on my mac and cheese sauce over here. Yep, we've got all the butter melted. It's looking good. Let's see what's next in that recipe. So you may wonder why it is I keep on referencing these recipes over and over again. One of the reasons why is because I want you to see where I've gotten them from. Both of these actually come from the Test Kitchen of Bon Appetit. If you don't subscribe to those folks on YouTube, I highly recommend it. There's lots of really great stuff for both basic and advanced cooks. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to drain those shells that I talked about before. So not the macaroni. We don't use macaroni in this macaroni and cheese recipe. We're going to drain our little tiny shells, and let's see if they're still little and tiny. So I'm going to drain them. Again, I'm going to save the pasta water because we may be using that pasta water later on. Okay, here we go. I'm going to see if I can give you a close-up of the pasta water, or the pasta. There we go. That's what they look like now. Not so tiny, and I managed to show you without dropping any of it on the floor. I just dripped it everywhere, that's all. Okay, so now that I've done that, we're going to, we've already saved that water. I wonder if we get to add the shells now to the rest. I don't think so. Let's see. Drain pasta, add to the pot with the milk mixture. Return to medium heat and cook, tossing with a wooden spoon to evenly coat all shells about 30 seconds. Wow. So let's do that. So even before we add the cheese. That's interesting. And I don't mind if I have some of this delicious stuff in my macaroni and cheese, so I'm not washing off that spoon. How are we doing on heat? Pretty good. Oh, I'm happy with that. That smells good already. I've got a really good feeling about this. Okay, so now that's pretty evenly coated. They said about 30 seconds, I think. That's enough. And we're going to add, it says, a third of your grated Parmesan. Once again, how much do you like cheese? That's how much cheese you should put in. So there we go. If you check out the recipe, which obviously we'll share with you, then you can see how much they recommend. I just added about a quarter cup maybe, and I'm mixing that all together. And they want me to stir the pasta vigorously. Okay, so changing my grip. Okay, there we go. That's a vigorous stir. Man, that looks fantastic. That looks really good. Okay. So there we go. Let's see. Repeat this process 2 more times with the remaining Parmesan. So they really want us to keep on doing it. It seems like they want us to add this Parmesan as it melts. So in a similar way to what we did with the butter. So not all the butter at once. You can understand why with something like this, the consistency of the sauce is so important. And so if you added everything all at once, then you might end up with a consistency that you didn't intend, or that you, oh my gosh, this looks good. Oh, y'all, I wish you were here to share this with me. Okay, that's plenty of cheese for me. Okay, and while that finishes melting, let's see what they recommend next. Okay, so they think we're pretty much done. What they are asking us to do, though, is to check the consistency. And if we feel like we want that sauce to be a little runnier, then we can add some pasta water. I'm going to do that just to experiment. I'm pretty happy with the way that it looks. But I want to see what happens when I add some of that thickened pasta water. Why pasta water and not regular water? Well, because when you boil the pasta, some of the pasta, just to put it simply, leaves the pasta and enters the water, which makes it into a thicker consistency water, and people oftentimes like to use that to cook. I've even known some folks who save their pasta water and they use it for other things later on. All right, so here we go. I'm going to give it a try. I have the biggest pot of pasta water in the world. And let's see, what will I use? I'll use this little 1/3 cup. I'll try some of that. So I can't give you a close-up here. I'll just describe what I'm seeing, I guess. Yeah, oh, I see. It's kind of loosening it up. It's making it into much more of a sauce and less just like sticky, cheesy pasta shells. So that's good. I think I'm going to add some more. I like that. So now let's talk about what you would do if you wanted that. Some people really like to have sort of a breadcrumb crust at the top of their macaroni and cheese. And so what some folks will do is they'll take a casserole dish and then they will take some additional cheese and some breadcrumbs and they'll sprinkle those things on the top of their macaroni and cheese. And then they'll heat up their oven, usually to a broil, so that's a really high temperature. And then they'll put the the casserole dish in the oven, and they will bake it for, 5 or 6 minutes or something like that. I guess broil it for 5 or 6 minutes, just until the top becomes browned. And then they get to have that consistency that they like. I like it, but I'm not going to go to all the trouble of doing it right now. Okay, I think we're pretty much ready to serve, although there are a couple of things that I'm going to add to my macaroni and cheese. So y'all already know that I like a little bit of heat, so I'm going to add some crushed red pepper. And I'm going to show you a couple of other things I'm going to consider adding if I feel like it. One of them is mustard. So I know that another cook that I know who's in my class, who shared a macaroni and cheese recipe with me, likes to use mustard in their macaroni and cheese. I'm the same way. I like to do that too. Usually I use Grey Poupon mustard, not just because I'm English, but also because I think it's a great Dijon mustard. Some people like to use a grainy mustard, like a brown mustard, but if you use just like a French's yellow mustard, that would probably be good too. It adds a little bit of tang to the macaroni and cheese, and it keeps it from being so bland on the palate. I've also excuse me. All sorts of pickled stuff. What I would like about that is they would add the acid that I like to balance out what I've been cooking. I've also got some pickled carrots here, which sounds kind of gross, but trust me. So that might be something that I experiment with as well. But first, let's take some first tastes on each one of these. Let's see. I'll use my mixing spoon here. So let me put some of my mac and cheese on one side and some of my chickpea pasta on the other side. I have to tell you, the first time that I cooked the chickpea pasta, I was using just like a can of Parmesan cheese instead of the stuff that comes in the package, or even better, like a solid Parmesan cheese that you grate. And the melt was way better with this. So if you're just using like the powdered Parmesan cheese, you'll end up with a really different consistency. Let me show you what we've got. So over on this side, boy, that coloring is terrible. Over on this side, we've got the macaroni and cheese. And over on this side, we've got the chickpea pasta. So let's give that a try. I want to get some chickpeas in there too. There we go. That's really fantastic. Let me try this mac and cheese. As you could probably tell as I was going, this is the first time I've used this exact recipe for mac and cheese. Let me try it out. Oh my gosh. Whoa, that's way better than it has any right to be. It was so simple. That is excellent. I highly, highly recommend that. That is way good. Wow. Well, if you've been cooking with me, I hope yours turned out well. You can share some pictures of what you made. If you haven't cooked this yet and you're just watching this to prepare to cook later, we'd love to see what you come up with. If you've been cooking at all over this break, we want to see some of the things that you've been preparing. So share them with us on Instagram. You can also share them with us via email at the programs at projectsuccess.org email address. It's been a pleasure doing this, knowing that so many of you are out there and that some of you might be watching and following along. I miss you guys if you're part of the Project Success Institute. And if we've never met before, hopefully we get to meet soon. See you next week from my own apartment kitchen. Take care and have a good night.